Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. On today's podcast, I have with me Tom Rowlands, and he is the Managing Director of Global EV Solutions at AllStar. Tom, thank you ever so much for joining me. It's really lovely to meet you. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So you were previously Vice President of Strategy at Fleetcore, which is the parent company for AllStar, isn't it?
Yep.
Am I right?
Yep, correct. Yep, exactly.
And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and we'll kind of go into this, but you're involved in investments in the UK-based Mina. That it sounds like you've been involved in many things, and you've worked for the company for a little while.
Yep.
It would be great to kind of start off with by getting a little bit of background to Tom, to you, to sort of like, you know, how you got into this industry and sort of what's your journey been.
Yep. No, of course. Yeah. No, and it's been probably the most exciting 3 years of my career, I would say. You know, with the whole EV piece and the way that the market's moved and evolved and continues to. And I think one thing I always try to remind myself is we're still incredibly early, despite having been working on it for 3 years. And we also invested in ZapMap, and Ben and Mel, who kind of founded that company, have been working on it for 10 years. So I'm always intrigued as to what it was like working in EV 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was previously a consultant working in mergers and acquisitions at KPMG and Deloitte, and I came to Fleetcore through a prior connection. So my current boss, who runs Global Fleet, I knew him from a previous acquisition, and he was looking for a director of strategy. And I thought, you know, fuel cards with the transition to EV, you know, is it a great place to go? And I decided it would be really exciting to try and go to a place where there was so much change in the industry, so much upheaval. And that was 5 years ago, so my work anniversary was actually 5 days ago. So 5 years.
Oh, was it? Oh, congratulations.
5 years and 5 days. So for the first couple of years, it was really looking at kind of fuel card strategy and trying to figure out, you know, our beyond fuel strategy, as we termed it, which part of that was EV.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I first joined the company 5 years ago, very few of our customers actually were really asking us about EV and weren't really looking for EV solutions. It was still very unknown in the fleet space.
Yeah.
And then 3 years ago, we really started to get more interest, more questions, and more more demand for a product. And that's really when I stepped into the more formal, role and started to build out more of a core organization within Fleetcore to deal with EV and to make sure that we were focused enough and delivering the products that our fleet customers need. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey. Particularly the last 3 years have been incredibly interesting.
So where does Fleetcore originate? You know.
Yeah. So Fleetcore is only 20 years old as a company itself. So it was founded in the US by our current CEO and chairman, Ron Clark. And really, Fleetcore has gone around acquiring lots of very similar businesses. So Fleetcore really is a payments and networks business. So we own fuel card businesses, but we also own lodging businesses, toll businesses, corporate payment businesses. So anything with a network and a payment system, Fleetcore tends to get involved in. So EV, we don't really see it as all that different from a fuel card, because what we're helping a fleet manager do is manage their drivers' payment and spend, and what we're helping an end user do is pay as easily as possible for that end fueling, whether it's electricity or fossil fuel. So that's really what the company's all about. It started 20 years ago as a very small company, and it's grown through over 100 acquisitions all around the world. So it's been, again, I haven't been obviously on the Fleetcore journey for all of that time, but that's also been quite an amazing journey as a company as well.
And the total number of people is, you mentioned 600 people to me before we started recording. Is that across Fleetcore, or is that just in the UK?
No, that's just in the UK. So Fleetcore itself has about 11,000.
Wow.
Employees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Goodness me, that's a fair-sizable business, isn't it? Really. Goodness. Yeah. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your acquisition of your involvement with Mina?
Yeah. So, I mean, the EV story for us started on the road, I guess, which was a kind of natural place for us to go. We had our fuel cards, and we knew how to negotiate network deals with fuel merchants, and we started to approach charge point operators to offer up the ability for their networks to accept our cards. Clearly, that was attractive to the charge point operators, and still is today, because we have 1 million card holders who we can advertise their charge points to and enable them to pay on their charge points. So that's really where we started back in 2019. We launched the AllStar One Electric card, which is a hybrid fuel and EV card. So particularly back then, when people were driving PHEVs, they could go to a fuel station, but they could also go to a charge point operator and pay for both. So that was very convenient. Very quickly, when I kind of got very involved in EV, we established that actually home charging would be making up a huge proportion of people's charging overall. And to be honest, when we first looked at the problem, we kind of didn't really know where to start. How do you actually solve this problem of home charging? So we went through various iterations, talking to home charge hardware providers, home charge installers, and we just kind of scanned the market to see what solutions were out there. And must have been in 2020, late 2020, we came across Ash and Chris from Mina. So they're two of the founders. Andy is the other founder, and we got talking to them about their solution and about what they were doing, and we just found it incredibly innovative and incredibly interesting. And I was slightly dubious that the solution would work because it sounded kind of the perfect fit for the problem that we were trying to solve. But effectively, what they do is they enable a driver to go home, simply charge their vehicle. We collected all the information around that charge, the tariff, the amount of kilowatts charged, and then we directly reimburse the utility company so that the employee's never out of pocket, doesn't get it added to their bill, and they don't see a sort of huge uptick in their direct debits and their energy bills. So that's really what Mina does, and we first partnered with them for a couple of months, but then we quite quickly realized we very much liked the solution, we believed in the solution, and we wanted them to go faster, and we wanted to enable them to go faster. So we did the first round of investment into them to give them more cash to go quicker. And subsequently, we've invested again into Mina, and I also sit on their board as part of that investment to kind of help drive and advise on the direction of travel for that business.
Because I suppose, like you say, it makes sense, because kind of the way that you partner together, you're working in conjunction with one another, aren't you? And kind of it's complementary services, really, isn't there?
No, that's exactly it. And I think my philosophy certainly is, as you just said, we're a huge company, right? And huge companies are fantastic in many ways, but they have drawbacks in their ability to go fast, their ability necessarily to always innovate. And I think you just have to accept that and be honest and open about that. So we partner, right? We partner with people, small startups who are doing, super exciting things in the space, and Mina is one of those. Because I just don't think we would have ever been able to develop the technology in the same way that Mina has to deliver that solution. And I think the interesting thing about Mina is where they came from, so where the idea came from. So Ash actually had a previous business that worked with the utility sector, and he would make payments to those utility companies for a different purpose.
Okay.
And that's how he got into the space. So he kind of transported that technology into the EV space when he saw a niche, and So it's quite a specific story to Ash, that particular founder, as to how he how he kind of launched Mina. So a really interesting story, and it was a really great story to see them succeeding so well in the market.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, it's good when you can move that technology from one place to another, because I always think, why reinvent the wheel when
Exactly.
somebody's already invented it in the first place and made it actually fit for purpose? It makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you were also talking to me about, before we started recording, about ZapMap. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your involvement with ZapMap as well?
Yeah, so again, I think it's a similar story, right? We accept that we can't do everything, and there's people in the market doing exciting things and very focused on specific elements of the value chain. So the opportunity came up to also invest into ZapMap. Clearly, ZapMap are fantastic from a data perspective, in terms of all the data points that they get from all of the charge point operators, real-time data on availability, and kind of all those kind of things. And they've also started to develop ZapPay. So at the moment, what you're able to do is you're able to lodge your AllStar card into ZapMap. You can then do kind of all your mapping. You go into AllStar mode. You can see all the charge points that are accepted on the AllStar card. And then you can route to those charge points, understand whether they're available, and then pay either with your physical RFID card or via the ZapMap app. So that's proven really popular with our customers, and it's allowed us to get product into market, again, quicker than perhaps we would have been able to on our own. And now we're working with ZapMap, who are developing APIs for us to be able to plug into, so that we can plug a lot of their capabilities into our apps directly. So through this year, we'll be migrating from lodging into the ZapMap app into API functionality into our own app, so that our users can benefit from all of the great things that ZapMap do down the line. And again, similar to how you said, Mina is very complementary. ZapMap are very focused on the B2C consumer market in the UK at the moment. We're obviously very focused on the fleet market. So again, it's relatively synergistic and complementary in terms of how we work together.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. You know, like I say, bringing these different technologies together to work with what you've got and actually boost what you're providing in the first place will make a massive difference to the fleets, won't it, in the first place?
Yeah, and I think part of it's, you know, as you said, reusing things that exist, not reinventing the wheel, but also speed to market, because people want this stuff yesterday, and people want better solutions, particularly around EV charging, incredibly quickly. So yeah, it's all about speed as well.
So how is AllStar grown in the UK since you've been? Obviously, you've got, like I say, you've got 600 employees now. What was it when you first joined 3 years ago then?
Well, so AllStar as a business has actually been around for a very, very long time. It's been around for longer than Fleetcore, because it was acquired by Fleetcore. So the size of AllStar itself hasn't changed significantly over the period, because clearly we've been providing fuel card solutions and fleet solutions to businesses for many, many years. And this transition to EV has been a kind of, I guess, a slow and gradual one, although we have obviously increased the number of dedicated EV people in the UK. So we have about 20 people in my organisation in the UK who are dedicated solely to either developing the EV product, developing connected car solutions, which is clearly an interesting and important element of the EV value chain, or selling our products, dedicated EV selling salespeople.
Yeah, I probably saw some of those because you had to stand at the EV show as well, didn't you, last year?
We did, yeah. So we're trying to get
our there? Did I walk past you? I might walk past you while you were there.
Possibly.
It's funny, kind of just getting to know everybody through the podcast. It's brilliant, because my thinking is that next time I actually go to one of these shows, I will know lots of people, which is always a lovely thing anyway. And I've had some fantastic guests on, obviously, including yourself. So
yeah, and I mean the EV world, the EV world's great. It's very small still, and obviously it's growing, which is fantastic. But you know, once you're kind of in the EV world, it's not a huge place, and lots of people have been in it for a very long time. So it's great to see those people who've invested in it and been there from the beginning and believed in it, starting to see the fruits of what they've worked on. But it's also a very nice industry, a very collaborative industry. Lots of people want to work together to make things work, which is nice to see as well. So it's a really good place to work. It feels like we're doing good things.
And I think that's you've hit the nail on the head there for me, because to be honest, it's like I go on LinkedIn a lot, and I know I've seen you kind of your profile on there, and in some industries there's not a lot of chatter, people are just kind of head down, just getting on with their work, but in the EV sector there's a lot of chatter, as in the infrastructure sector, in a really, really positive way, and people are really supporting one another, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Like you said about collaboration, it's great, because in some ways you hear quite a lot of negative and press. Last week there was the journalist who was talking about he'd given his iPace back because he'd had enough of it, and he'd had enough of the charging network, and blah 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 blah. But actually, lots of people on the other side who were very supportive of EVs were kind of like, well, we can understand why he said that, but this is just one person.
Yeah.
It depends how loud these people speak, doesn't it? As in the negativity, it's trying to get over it, get it over, or kind of reduce it, should I say, with positive comments rather.
Yeah, and I think that's only going to get more important because I think the industry's benefited from advocates being in EVs from the beginning, and now we're moving into a space where people who perhaps are not so keen on EVs are being put into EVs. Fleet drivers, for example, who would potentially prefer to stay in a diesel or a petrol, but they're being asked to move into an EV, and we need to make sure that their experiences are positive, and when they're negative, they understand why it is and why it's improving, and trying to kind of keep that message. And I think that segues quite nicely into, that's such an important thing for fleet managers to educate drivers before they get them into an EV. If you just throw someone into an EV and expect them to, operate it in the same way that they do with an ICE vehicle, you're going to have a car crash, and it's not a literal car crash, but a disaster. And then you get the negative voices. So I think education and selecting the right people, frankly, to put them into EVs. If you pick someone who is vehemently against EVs right now, they will find a problem with it, and they will shout very loudly about it. So I think fleet managers really need to pick advocates, or at least if they know someone's not an advocate, they really need to support them through that EV adoption period. Because when I first got an EV, I sort of kind of looked at it blankly and didn't really know where to start. And you figure it out, but if you really want to figure it out, it's okay. But if you don't, you can find lots of problems with it very easily. So you need to help people through that.
Well, we haven't got an EV just yet, and I've been test driving a few since before Christmas and recently, because I want to make an informed decision about this. And actually, I've got to say, and I've just written a blog about it. I'm going to do another podcast on it. My experience, and obviously I'm not a fleet driver. I'm self-employed, own a limited company, but there will only be me probably driving an EV on the business account. But I've gone through dealerships to test drive vehicles, and actually my experiences, and I've spoken about this a bit before, have been really, really varied. But what I would say is that thank God I've actually been talking to people who know what they're talking about, because chucked me in an EV and didn't tell me very much about it. The whole regenerative braking, thank goodness for John Burdekin. I don't know whether you know him, but he was amazing talking to me about regenerative braking, and actually I got it. If you can talk to people, I kind of, in this blog that I've just written, I've kind of said to people, if you're not coming on the podcast or you're not listening to podcasts, just do your own research, because otherwise just jumping in, like you say, it's not always easy to kind of get your head round. And because people don't like change, if you're being forced to go into a fleet vehicle,
exactly,
like you said, I always call them the arms folded brigade. not on my front door kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? And there will always be somebody that will just kind of will not appreciate what you're trying to do, even if it's pushing them in the right direction.
Yeah, and it can be relatively basic things, right? It's different, but it's not necessarily worse. You have to plan a little bit more. Yes, you have to kind of think about, hey, I'm going to charge here, and if this charge point is not available, I'll go to this one. But if you do that, it kind of works, right? You can pull into the service station. Okay, it's busy. Well, I'll go to the next one because I know I've still got enough range, and it's kind of fine. And I think Thomas, who I'm sure you know, who founded World EV Day, was on the BBC the other day, kind of talking about, you should only really charge to 80% because once you get to 80%, then it takes a lot longer, things like that. And particularly with fleet vehicles, it's really important to understand all those kind of things because the operational downtime is important. So you've also got the other side of it on the fleet side where potentially, I'm not saying everyone, but some people might be happy to sit there for an hour and a half and read a magazine or read the newspaper whilst their vehicle charges, but their fleet manager probably isn't very happy about that because they want them active and working and whatever else. And sometimes it won't be the driver's fault because there won't be a rapid charger available, and they'll have to charge somewhere else. So there's all of these operational issues that you have to take into account also with fleet vehicles, which is something we come across a lot and work through. And I think one thing I always say, whilst being a huge EV advocate, is also do your research on the vehicle as well and the routes. So what route is that vehicle doing? Is it appropriate to put that to EV? Because again, forcing a vehicle that can't really do the routes and the work it's supposed to do into EV will again just cause more barriers because it won't work. People will have issues, and then they'll say EVs don't work, when that's not correct. It's just that EV is not necessarily applicable for that particular route or distance or kind of work stack that's being undertaken. So I think doing that level of research is also important to make sure you're switching the right vehicles over, and if not, you can always put them onto far more efficient ICE fuels as well.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about making sure that things are fit for purpose, like you say, about doing the research. Do you know what? I didn't know about the 80% though. I know that there was a lot of hoo-ha and furore, wasn't there, before Christmas because people were stood for, the Tesla chargers for hours on end, getting waiting for a charge point.
Yeah.
But I didn't realise about once it gets to 80%, that the final 20 takes a lot longer. So that's actually interesting. You're the first person who said that, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I have to credit Abe Thomas with that one in terms of he was on the BBC kind of talking about that. But it's all about battery preservation. So the battery it slows down the charging rate to make sure that you don't damage the battery, because clearly charging to 100% is all the time is not great for the battery. So the battery automatically slows the charge down so that you don't damage the battery as you get towards 100%. So even if you're on a 350 kilowatt charger, once you hit 80%, you will be limited by the vehicle, by the car, in terms of the speed that you can actually get in there. So yeah, getting up to 80% and then getting on your way is the quickest way to charge, really.
Okay. Oh, that's really interesting to know actually, because I know that there was somebody on LinkedIn who basically was commenting on that situation with everybody in the Tesla chargers, and what they kind of suggested, and I found this really interesting actually. What they were saying was, if you've got, say, 10 chargers, no matter what they were, for example, and people are waiting to get them to 100%, there should be somebody there looking after those charge points.
Yes, I saw the same thing. Yeah.
Did you see it? Where they were actually saying, because then when they get to 80%, it's kind of like, right, okay, so what range do you actually need?
Yep.
Do you actually need it to be at 100% when you set off? Because there is this whole thing about, oh, well, I had my neighbour yesterday, he was basically saying to me, oh, well, certain cars haven't got a lot of range, electric vehicles, but it's kind of like, but what do you actually need?
Exactly. And again, this comes back to perception versus reality, and there's some really interesting tools out there to kind of look at, the behavior of the vehicle again. And when you run the analysis sometimes and look at the data, I think the key thing is always be data driven. And if you look at most vehicles, they're idle for 98% of their lives. So you have 98% of the time to charge it and 2% to drive it. And when you think of it in that context, there's loads of time to charge a vehicle most of the time. And also, particularly in fleets and company car vehicles, people overestimate the amount of mileage that they do massively. So when you ask someone, how many miles do you do during a week, they hugely overestimate it versus when you look at the actual data in terms of what they've done. So I mean, I have an iX3, which does give or take 200 miles. Yeah. There's 2-3 times a year when I do a trip that it can't do in one go, and that's usually fine. I'm probably a little bit of an exception because I live in London, but most of the time you can kind of make it to a destination. If you plan, you kind of know where you can charge, you can leave it, you go do your meeting, you go do whatever you need to do, and you charge. Different for fleet vehicles, obviously operational vehicles, and they have to have more surety of that kind of rapid charging network. So I think more and more hubs coming online, so like the GridServe site at Rugby and other sites where there's an ultra rapid hub is going to be more and more important for fleets. But we're getting there, and I think infrastructure's struggling to keep up, which I guess is a good thing because so many EVs are coming into the market now. But some of the charge point operators are doing fantastic work in terms of building more and more infrastructure. And I think we need to recognise they're investing huge amounts of capital and not getting the returns right now. So they're doing not quite a public service, but they are investing a lot with relatively low returns at this point.
Yeah, because we've got to look at this, long term, haven't we? Really. So yeah, they're investing now for the future. Yeah. And actually, and creating that level of trust that either fleet drivers or fleet owners need, or the kind of customers, the B2C customers need, the consumers need, and I think that's really important, and to drive away all the negativity in the first place. I was going to ask you, because this just popped into my head. I said to you, I'll come off on there's random thoughts pop into my head sometimes. I was reading last week, and I don't know whether you saw this, and I can't even remember the name of this Chinese car company that are introducing EVs into the UK. It's one that I'd not heard of before. Something like Neos.
Is it Neo?
Yes, Neo. That's it. Yeah.
So Neo is actually a customer of ours because we acquired Plug Surfing. So Plug Surfing is a roaming provider in Europe and the UK of charge cards for end B2C customers. So OEMs are our customers. We provide the cards to OEMs, who then provide them to the end users. So yeah, Neo is a customer of Plug Surfing, which is great. So
okay, my question then is, what do you think about the whole battery swapping technology, and is it something that's possible in the UK, for example? Will it take off? I'm just kind of thinking, how would this work? And we're talking about this is something to work a lot, to run alongside charge point operators, isn't it? Really, the whole battery swapping.
It's really interesting. And I can't remember who I was having the debate with last week. I was talking about this with someone. I think it has its place. Do I think it has its place in B2C and consumer? I'm not sure. I personally think the better use case for it is actually in fleet, where fleets need that quick ability to get a van or an operational vehicle back on the road quickly. So if you had the battery swapping technology in depots, and for kind of emergency situations or times when a van's going to come in empty and it needs to go straight back out, it's the perfect solution. I think it will have a place. The UK is obviously challenging from a space perspective, versus the US or China or whatever, where you can actually fit these physical locations to swap the batteries. I think that's probably the bigger challenge in the UK is we don't really even have enough space to get charge points in a lot of our locations. So where do these fit? I think it will be kind of more of a premium type service for those people who just want to pay the premium cost and get on their way. So I think it will have a place, but I don't think it will be as mainstream as potentially other countries due to our space restrictions. But I really do think it has quite a strong use case in depot. Yeah. And what I said at the EV summit when I was talking on a panel there, the key thing for me is having a mix of all of these solutions. That's what's going to enable us to get to where we need to get to.
Yeah.
Home charging, slow AC charging on the road, rapid charging on the road, battery swapping, all of these different types of solutions combined can get us where we need to get to. In isolation, it's a struggle, because of the constraints on the network and all those kind of things. So I think the key thing for me is combining all of these things together. I can see a path, so that's the key for me.
I agree with you about the depot side, though. It was just before you said it, I was just thinking of that, and I just thought, actually, I suppose if you're looking at, say, like a Royal Mail fleet or somewhere like that, exactly, then that would work really, really well, wouldn't it? If you had a dedicated kind of area for kind of battery swapping, because it looked, from what it looked like on the video that I was watching, because it was very impressive, the video, but it kind of reminded me of a car wash.
Yeah.
Exactly. When you kind of drive into a car wash, but instead of actually, kind of washing your car, it's going underneath and swapping the battery over. And I just thought, actually, space-wise, you're kind of restricted. But if you've got a fleet of 100 vans, and at the end of the day, they all come back and they just go in there, swap the battery over, and then the next day, you don't have to worry about charging them up. So I can get where that'd work.
Yeah, and again, I think it will be a mix, right? Because in depots, one of the big problems a lot of our customers and fleets have is getting enough power into the depot to charge 100 vans, right? Because that's a huge amount of power. So if you have 20 charge points instead of 50 or 80, and then the rest is done through battery swapping, and you have some rapid charges for emergencies, and then the rest is kind of AC slow to do overnight, and then you do the battery swapping. That mix can kind of get you to where you need to get to, without having to put in substations and spending millions of pounds on kind of all those kind of things.
It just makes sense, doesn't it? It really does. If you've got to mitigate some costs somewhere, haven't you? Really. Yeah. So if we kind of finish off by kind of find it. So if people are interested. So we're looking specifically at fleets. Is there a minimum number in a fleet that you would actually be managing?
No. So I mean, AllStar is quite a broad customer base. So we have everything from single vans and van operators all the way up to huge fleets like the Royal Mail and Mighty and other customers. So we really do serve the whole spectrum of customers and always have done with our fleet solutions. So no minimum, and we're obviously very used to serving huge fleets at the same time. And I think that's one of the key things that we're trying to do is we're incorporating mixed fleets, because obviously if someone with a single van swaps over, that's relatively simple. They had a fuel card and now they have an EV card, kind of easy. These big fleets that are moving, they're going to be mixed for a long time. So we're building the EV capability into our traditional dashboards and ICE dashboards, so fleet managers can look at their fuel spend, their EV on-road spend, their at-home spend, their workplace spend. They can see it all in one dashboard. They can see the kind of carbon intensity of the ICE, they can see the carbon intensity of the EV, and they can compare and contrast, and they can switch vehicles over from ICE to EV easily in one dashboard. Yeah. So that's the kind of premise of what we're trying to build. And I think we're in a very privileged and unique position to be able to help with that transition as people take an ICE vehicle and move over. But yeah, that's what we're trying to build out.
So if people want to contact you or who's the best person to get in touch with? Obviously, you don't want loads of people contacting you as MD, do you? Because you've got a lot of things going on. So who would they need to contact? And so is it just allstar.com or is it allstar.co.uk for the website?
So if they just go to the AllStar website, if they just type in AllStar Business Solutions to Google or to wherever, then they'll come to the AllStar website, and all of our solutions are available there. If they want to speak to someone specifically, I'll call him out. So Phil Hale leads EV sales for me and for my organisation. So if you find him on LinkedIn or whatever, I'm sure he would be more than happy to discuss any opportunities on the EV charging on the roadside, or also on the home side of things as well. Okay,
but you're also on LinkedIn if anybody wants to have if they want to have a chat with you, I suppose, or see what
always
you're doing.
Happy to talk EV. I drove my car to Hampstead and was going for a run, and I put it on a Source London, and my wife always gets very upset because I end up chatting to people about EV at a charge point for about 15 minutes before we're able to get moving.
Oh goodness.
Sorry.
That popped up.
Yeah, sorry, apologies.
No, it's fine. Okay, so you upset your wife, did you, by talking?
I always end up chatting to a taxi driver or someone about charging vehicles, the problems, the solutions, the pros and the cons. So yeah, it's always a good place to make new friends at a charge point.
Absolutely. It's a bit like dog walkers, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly.
Or just walkers in the hillside. You always talk to somebody. Right, well listen, Tom, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been lovely to talk to you. I really appreciate it. So yeah, to everybody else, I'm going to say goodbye, and I shall see you next time. And Tom, thank you again. Thanks. Then. Bye everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.